Hello, and welcome to Fresh Blood, a podcast about killing it after 40, where we prove that new blood does not necessarily equal young blood. Here to discuss what it takes to have continued success through life, I'll be your host, Jolie Downs. With over 20 years of executive recruiting experience, I've learned how much we can grow and be inspired by other people's stories. I'm excited to share that with you here on Fresh Blood. Today we are talking with John Jack. John is an actor and producer of 20 years standing. He has enjoyed a career which has spanned the worlds of theater, film, and television. He has appeared in many hit productions, from award-winning television programs such as Silent Witness to West End hits like Phantom of the Opera and Shout to the Netflix movie Princess Switched Again. John is also a first-time author. His book, Letters to My Former Self, is his first foray into inspirational writing and is the first installment of a multi-part series. I am really looking forward to learning more. Thank you for joining us on Fresh Blood, John. Please tell us a little bit about your career and what brought you to this point of writing a book.
Hi, Jolie. First of all, thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Tell you about my career and what led me to write the book. Gosh, I wrote the book. I began writing the book in 2009, so a long time ago. And I had been an actor since 2000. I left drama school in 2000, and that's the career that I pursued since then. Like most actors, obviously that's involved other things to keep the wolf from the door from time to time, but that has always been my sort of main focus. But the book came into being in 2009, and I wrote a fairly rough draft of it and then put it away for years and years and years. And then during lockdown, I found myself, like a lot of people, saying, all of a sudden I have all this time on my hands and it's this awful global pandemic and it's really depressing and we don't know how long it's going to last. And I have to do something in this time which is positive. You know, any casting directors listening, take note. But once I'd pulled every last hair from every last plug hole in my house, I really was left with nothing really. I wanted to use that time. It's so rare that, and it's a ghastly situation for it to happen, and I understand that. Millions have died, and I don't in any way, shape or form to make light of that. But it's so rare to be forced to stop in the middle of our hectic lives. We all live hectic lives nowadays. It doesn't matter whether you're a Fortune 500 company CEO or whether you work in a normal 9-to-5 job. We all live in a digitized, frenetic, modern society. And this, someone described that first lockdown, and I say first lockdowns, I don't know what it's been like in America, but we've had several lockdowns in Britain. And that first one, the one, have you been the same? Same in America?
I've been in California, so we've had many lockdowns ourselves too.
Right. Mm-hmm. We've been the same. And that first one, though, none of them have quite had the same depth charge of a resonance to them as that first one. And I heard that described by someone, a very sage person whose name escapes me. I can't actually remember who it was, but it stuck with me. Described that as the great pause.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and that's evocative. Yes. That's evocative. And it's this great mantle of nothingness descended on the earth. Not just one country, but the whole world. And I really wanted to come out of that having done something positive, because there was a part of me realised, I thought at the time that it would never happen again. It actually has happened subsequently several times, but didn't know that at the time. And so I dug this book out, and it was on a memory stick. And in 2009 into 2010, I'd had a literary agent, a very prestigious literary agent involved with it. And for various reasons, including the death of my mother, I decided not to pursue it. And so it sat on a memory stick for a decade. And I kind of thought to myself, what can I do that's positive for me, that's a project for me, that I can be creative? My creativity was taken away from me, as it was for a lot of people. So I was looking for a project, but I was also looking for something that could again, I don't know what it's like in America, but we were being asked to potentially volunteer to support the NHS in this country. There was a real community spirit around at that time. Can you visit an elderly neighbour if they need grocery shopping? So I was looking for something that could maybe serve other people a little bit. And I remembered this book, which was a collection of, I think at the time, I had a sort of rough draft of 17 different little treatises, little essays on life. I subsequently became 21. 21 to me sounded like a good sort of solid number. And so I pulled it out and I began to work on it. And I worked on it quite feverishly during the whole lockdown. And I don't mind telling you, Jolie, that saved my sanity, having that to concentrate on. And out of it came quite quickly a fully formed manuscript that I then ferried off to my wonderful editor, and she worked through it with me, and we got it into print really quite quickly. So, it's one of those things, it's when the time is right. And the time obviously wasn't right in 2009. But this last year, the time seemed to be right. And they say that when the time is right, it's easy. And all of a sudden, everything became easy. And before I knew it, I was holding a copy of it in my hand. So it was a real, I was going to say it's a labour of love. It really wasn't a labour at all. It was an absolute joy to have some kind of self-expression, some kind of ability to keep control in a world where there was no control.
Oh, isn't that so true? Being able to focus on what we can control as opposed to what we can't control is what helps keeps us sane, really. And finding that flow of creativity is a gift. It is a podcast guest I recently had. She talked about how that brought you into the zone of bringing something new into the universe. And it keeps you out of that need of addiction, negative feelings, what have you. It's just it's a very pleasurable, joy-filled zone to be in that zone of creativity. Right. So it is a gift. And it makes me reflect on how much creativity was birthed really last year and what will be seen flourish this year.
I think you're right. There will be, I'm no prophet, but I think there will be a renaissance of a sort after this has been conquered and after the pandemic dies down and we begin to start looking at rebuilding, because we will need to rebuild. Our world has been irrevocably changed by this. And I think out of that will come a renaissance, the likes of which came after the Black Death in the Middle Ages, the likes of which came after the First World War and the influenza pandemic of 1918. So out of a ghastly, awful, deadly world health crisis, I think over the next decade may come extraordinary works of art, leaps of science and literature. And I hope that can come from something as ghastly as what we've been through, because that's the dawn after the dark night, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, I agree. And it's my hope. It is my fervent hope. John, tell me, I'm curious with your book, because you wrote this in 2009, and we all know what it's like to have life get in the way of these goals that we might have. I'm really sorry to hear about your mother. A death of a loved one completely just throws things into the works. How did you get through the difficult? I have a couple questions. We're going to start with this one. How did you get through the difficult times in pursuit? Because through this, you continued with your acting career and obviously did a lot of successful things. How did you move forward through those difficult times?
I was very lucky. I had work. When my mother passed away, I was working in the West End of London. I was in Phantom of the Opera at the time. And when I left Phantom, I almost immediately went back to Phantom to do the 25th anniversary concert at the Albert Hall. So that was a time of real work, and that was as my mother was on her final journey. So I had a creative outlet, I had work, I had companionship and camaraderie. The cast at the time that I was with in that West End show were like my family, and I'm still very close to many of them, and they got me through that. What I couldn't do was at the risk of sounding a bit self-indulgent, I couldn't birth creativity, if that makes sense. I could do it. I could go on stage and perform someone else's words and in a costume and do the job and that. What I couldn't do was create any, if that sort of makes sense. I remember sitting down. I had a deadline from the agency that I was working with. and they'd sent me some corrections, and I sat down to do those corrections. And I remember this feeling of physical nausea that would wave over me every time I sat down and tried to do it. And it got to the point where I thought, it's not there at the moment. Step away from it.
Yeah.
And I did. I did. And in hindsight, it was the right thing to do. But overall, what got me through that was work. It was friendship. It was family. It was being surrounded by good people, positive.
What I'm hearing, staying the connection, being connected.
Absolutely. And it's that feeling of being not even just your people having your back, but underneath you. There's a cradle there. You can don't worry about falling. We will catch you. And there's a real freedom to be vulnerable in that, and to be to not have to be as strong as perhaps you feel that you have to be normally day to day. It's okay. You can fall apart. You can grieve. You can be upset. I remember when I was in rehearsals for the 25th anniversary concert of Phantom at the Albert Hall, and I'd received a phone call from one of the specialists at the hospital, and they'd said, be on standby, and just in case we call you. And I remember speaking to a dear friend of mine, Philip Griffiths, an actor he'd been in Phantom for about 30 years now. And he was like company dad in a way. And I remember going to Philip and saying, look, I have this situation. I may need to walk out of this building mid-performance. And I remember him saying, if that happens, don't worry about it. Just pick your stuff up, take your costume off, and leave the building, and I will speak to Cameron McIntosh on your behalf. And it's that kind of thing where you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to fret about doing what you need to do. So that got me through it. These people got me through it. That job got me through it, and subsequent jobs. I've always found work to be a real salve in my life. Work. Yeah, absolutely. Good. I must quantify what I mean by that. Actors and many other professions, in the pursuit of their what's the word I'm looking for? Vocations, because that's what they are. They are vocational. And the pursuit of the vocations often have to do jobs which are less than desirable. And that's not really what I'm talking about, although they have their value as well. But I'm talking about good, healthy work that feeds your soul. And for me, that's always been the thing that has oiled my joints, if you like. Whenever I'm getting a bit creaky, that's oiled my joints. And I think who was it that said, Humphrey Bogart's wife, Lauren Bacall. It was Lauren Bacall who said, I always enjoy my holidays much more when I know there's work to come at the end of it. And
I like that. It's true.
So true. So true. So for me, it's work, it's good friends, it's good people, and it is right thinking. And I've learned over the years.
About the right thinking. I think that's important.
Absolutely. I've learned over the years to question my thought process, to analyse my thought process, and to amend my thought process where necessary. And to be honest with you, Julie, it's necessary quite a lot of the time.
Isn't it? Yes.
It really is. It really is. So those things get me not soaring through, not sailing through, bumbling through, tripping through, falling through sometimes, but getting through.
Getting it all through. No, I think that's wonderful. And now you've had a successful career as an actor, which is something that many people dream of. How did you get there? What brought you to being able to land these types of roles?
I went to drama school. I was going to study opera. And I'd semi-trained as an opera singer with a private tutor for a while when I was about 16, 17. And I was about to go off to opera school. And I just had
so this was something that you knew at a young age. So you were going to opera school when you were a teenager.
Yeah, I was in the church choir.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I was in the church choir. They don't exist anymore. They were called the Glenview Singers. And we used to travel all over Scotland doing gigging in churches. And somebody at some point said, you have quite a good voice. You should think about getting that trained. And so I went to my school music teacher, who put me in touch with the head of opera at the Royal Scottish Academy, which is now the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. And from there, I was put in touch with a wonderful singing teacher called Peter Alexander Wilson. And from there, I trained with him, and the view was that I was going to go to opera school. But I realised that I wanted to do other things. I wanted to be musical theatre for a start, which is not always very compatible with the very refined world of opera. And I wanted to be an actor. Julie. I wanted to speak Shakespeare and Chekhov and be in television dramas and movies. And that led me to a wider education at drama school. And I went to drama school, and in my final year, I won the Ian Bannon Memorial Award. And at the time, Ian Bannon was the only Scottish actor who'd ever been nominated for an Oscar at that time. I don't think that's the case now. It was at the time. And he had just, unfortunately and very tragically, been involved in an accident which he did not survive months before the award was due to be awarded. And that was the inaugural award. But so therefore that brought with it a certain amount of media attention as well. And I landed an agent, and I began to audition. I started doing the round of auditions and getting work and building up a CV and thoroughly enjoying it. I remember being in a rehearsal room at the Citizens Theatre in Glasgow, and we were rehearsing The Cherry Orchard. I think it was a Chekhov. And I remember the director, very famous director called Philip Proust, saying to me, you won't be needed tomorrow. We're going to work on these other scenes, so you won't be. And I was about 23. He said, you won't be needed tomorrow. And I said, okay. I said, do you mind if I come in anyway, just to watch? And he looked at me as if he'd never heard this before. And he said, if you've nothing better to do. And I did. I came in, and even though I wasn't needed, because I wanted to be there, I wanted to be saturated in it. And I used to go, and I still do sometimes if I'm doing theatre productions, I used to love to sit in the wings when I wasn't on and watch other actors perform their craft. And that's how I learned to do mine. So that's how it's kind of... I often say to people, I feel like I haven't had a career. I've just had a very lucky series of jobs.
That's a gift. Oh, that's a gift. Now, what about challenge? I'm sure you faced challenges and obstacles during this time. What has been one of your greatest challenges or failures or obstacles that you dealt with, and what did you learn from it?
An actor's greatest challenge is his or her ability to summon and continually summon. And there's no guarantee of ever having to stop summoning. Tenacity. It is an industry which, and any young people thinking about going into the acting industry, listen to this and take note. And this is something I've said in masterclasses I've done in the past. This industry promises you precisely nothing. And 9 times out of 10, that's exactly what it delivers. And so the ability to turn up again and again and again and get a no and another no and another no. And that's when it's good, Jolie. Sometimes you're not even getting into the room. So it's it's got to be vocational. I use that phrase deliberately because being a doctor or a minister or a priest or something like that, there's so many difficulties, and it's so fraught with so many disappointments as an industry that if you're going into it for guaranteed money or fame or continued success, you may as well do something else, because the chances are, if you do get there, it's a very long and hard journey. And
it needs to be your one.
You need to do it, actually. You need to do it. And I've often said to young actors, if there's anything else you think you can do that will make you happy in life, for the love of God, go and do it. But for those of you who are left, who know that this is the only thing that will feed your soul, welcome to the club. And so, in terms of obstacles, an actor in many ways faces obstacles every day. I've often said to people, the actor's real work, the real work that actors do, it's not on the stage, it's not in front of the camera, it's not in the audition room, it's not sitting in the agent's office charming them and hoping they'll take you on. It's every day when the phone doesn't ring. It's every day when the email doesn't come and you're waiting. And that waiting can go on for months. So that's the real Everest that an actor needs to climb. Anyone can shine on stage. It's whether or not you can shine when you're not there, when you're not doing what you want to do. And that's the real challenge.
Yeah. And that's really good advice for many different fields. You need to, if you're going to go into it, you need to really want it. It needs to be something that you need to do. And that's how you'll succeed, because that's how you get past all the challenges that come your way, because it's something that is inside of you that you're going to continue to do regardless of who pushes you down or knocks you over. You're just going to get back up.
And also, I think on a fairly Julie, at an attrition level. I remember years ago sitting in a dressing room with an older actor. I was sharing a dressing room with him, and he said, listen, he said, just hang in there long enough. I said, what do you mean? And he said, you'll find that as you move through the age brackets of your castability as an actor, over the years, the competition falls away. He said people, they get lured away to regular paying jobs. They have children. So therefore, they've got to go and find other sources of income, and they get lured away by that. There's lots of it. He said, and you'll find that it gets narrower and narrower and narrower as you go through the years until actually you're in quite a small pool by the end of it. And I've found that to be true in many ways.
That is good advice. And many people come into their own and in their 40s, 50s, 60s, what have you. So there's that sense of knowingness that happens within them that can change how they're seen from the outside as well.
I think you're absolutely.
What would you say has been key to continued success in your life?
Key to continued success. What has been key to continued success? My natural disposition, I don't know if it's about being a Taurus, being Taurian, I don't know what it is. My natural disposition is to be in a kind of torpor. I'm a bit of a dreamer. I'm an actor, a bit of head in the clouds by my very nature. And I'm really aware of a propensity to do nothing. And therefore, to counteract that, because I have a bit of a horror of that, Julie, I know that it lives in me. And so the way that I counteract that is by doing too much often, in an attempt to sort of stave that off. But a wonderful writer friend of mine, whom I've worked with many times, he's an actor as well, but he's also a very successful writer for theatre and television, award-winning actually. And he often says, nothing gets done until the cloth of your trousers touches the cloth of the seat. He said, nothing can happen until that happens. And that's true. And I've found that any continued success I've had has required consistent, deliberate, and sometimes against my better will and better judgment, effort on my part.
True. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, sure, there've been the odd thing that's floated into my lap and you go, it wasn't that lovely stroke of fortune, but then you trace it back and you go, but hold on a minute. If I hadn't have worked with that person last time, and I only worked with that person last time because I did that, and then I went to that party that I didn't want to go to, and I went that through. And if you trace that stroke of luck back, you actually realise it wasn't a stroke of luck at all. It actually is a result of something you did. It could be years ago.
Yes, you are so right. It all affects everything. And it's all about making the effort. You're so right.
Absolutely.
And you're not the only one that has it in them to do nothing.
Yeah.
And we all have it in ourselves, and we all have it in ourselves to do amazing things. And it is a matter of focus and where we put our minds. So it goes back to what you said, how you feed your mind in the right way. So have you adopted any specific habits that you feel help lead to your success? I
make my bed every day.
Oh, do you? No.
I make my bed every single day. And I like nice things. I'd like to think I have a nice home. And so my bed's a lovely feather duvet, and I have 6 pillows on it, and then there are cushions on top of the pillows, and making this thing is a task. I'm not talking just throw the cover over it and walk away. I make this thing every day. And there's something about doing that gets me started. Now, I'm not saying that everything I do is a result of making my bed, but what it does, it's a bit like having breakfast. Breakfast sets up your metabolism internally. There's something about making my bed in the morning that sets up my metabolism in terms of productivity. I would say the same thing about brushing my teeth to a certain extent and putting a comb through my hair. These are things that bookmark the fact that I'm now in working mode. I'm not in resting mode anymore. And I would say to anyone who struggles to get started in the morning, make your bed. It's something about it. I think that, if I remember correctly, I think there was quite a well-known military general who goes around telling people in seminars to make their bed because it's, I'm sure there is. I've heard
exactly what you said. It sets your mind up for success. So once you have that very easy success under your belt immediately, then you're ready to continue to have success. This goes along. It's like the fitness thing. What is it? A body in motion stays in motion. A body in rest stays in rest. Well, going along the same lines, a mind set up for success
Mm.
immediately is probably going to continue working towards
And
success
also,
throughout the day.
the other thing is, Julie, and in the second volume of this, which is in the works at the moment, there will be a chapter on ritual, the importance of ritual. As human beings, we are innately, almost, I think, genetically, I think we've done it for so long, it's become part of our genetics. We are moved by ritual. And that, if you're making your bed every day psychologically, or whatever it is you do, it might not be making your bed, it might be, I don't know, putting a comb through your hair or making a cup of coffee. But the act of doing that, just the ritual of it, takes your head into a different space.
Yeah.
It's habit forming, isn't it? And I think for me, healthy habits are things that kind of, because I guess I'm a bit like a robot in that sense. Once I've done the one thing, my little brain goes, all right, we're doing that now, and off it goes, and it goes chugging along. But if I do that, I don't make that bed, that chugging doesn't start. You know?
You want to start that.
Yeah, I'm a little robot.
Well, let's be honest, all of our brains are like that. Social media and video games are all playing off those little things in our brain. So you just have to figure out how to hack it the right way. And that's what you're doing, is setting up those right habit hacks.
Absolutely.
Now, I started to ask you, and then we veered off. So you started to write your book in 2009 and got off course because of life things. But what inspired you to start to write this book?
Okay. So therein lies a story. So in 2008, I went through a bit of a personal crisis, and I ended up putting myself into a 12-step fellowship. And for me, that was Alcoholics Anonymous. Some people say you shouldn't break your anonymity at media level. I've never agreed with that, so I have no problem with it. It could save a life, Julie. That's the way I look at it.
Yes.
And
It has saved many.
Yeah, and I have to say, as a complete aside to that, the reason why I entered a 12-step fellowship is because I saw a video of a Scottish actor who became a very well-known American television personality called Craig Ferguson, who was on The Late Show, and he did his own monologue about his time in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's seeing that is what led me into the fellowship and saved my life. So I'm very aware of how breaking one's anonymity at media level can save a life, because it saved mine. So I went through that, and I came into AA, and I began the work. It was a long journey, a long road of self-discovery, and a lot of work on myself and my thought patterns and all that kind of stuff. And stuff we were talking about earlier on, you're reframing your thoughts. That all stuff I learned in AA. And I'd lost my father in 2004. I lost my mother in 2011. So I didn't really have a father figure around at that time. And I was learning all of this sort of spiritual stuff in this fellowship and trying to assimilate it. My father had been a pastor, a minister, so I grew up in the church, and spirituality was nothing new to me. But I was learning a whole lot of life skills in there that needed assimilating. I did not have a father figure to turn to. And I was also feeling, I think, a little bit, how am I going to function in the world of the theatre and movies and television, where it's awash with alcohol and all that kind of stuff, without this crutch? And so I took to doing a writing course, a fairly well-known writing course, and one of the just to kickstart my creativity and recovery. And one of the exercises in that was to write a letter to yourself from the age of 80. And I did. And this voice came flowing out of me from goodness knows where, that was not my own, that was wise, and it was warm, and it was reassuring, and it was very, very kind, and it was knowledgeable, and it had foreknowledge as well. And it really struck a chord in me, and I went back to that letter time and time again. And over time, and I think I say this in the preface to the book, I began to think, this has helped me. This is solid gold life advice in here, and if it's helped me, there might be something in there for other people. And so the idea of a book came out of it. The idea of, if your future, much older self at the very end of your journey could speak to you with all your petty worries. And let's face it, in the grand scheme of things, the vast majority of our worries are pretty petty. We go into the good yardstick of, will this still matter in 5 years' time, is a pretty good, and it does tend to eliminate 95% of stuff.
Yes, doesn't it?
And the idea of having someone look back kindly who has been you, hasn't been in your position, hasn't been in a similar situation, but has been you, and looking back at themselves and getting that sort of impossible situation. But in fiction, of course, anything can happen. Being able to talk to your former self and not so much give them the answers, because that wouldn't be helpful, but just nudge them gently in the right direction, give them the right advice that they need to do the right thing. Wouldn't that be helpful? And
yeah.
a whole book emerged out of that. And it was as much, and I say in the book, and it's so true, I wrote the book for me. And it's not the first, it happened more than once that someone has turned around to me at various situations in my life since I wrote it and said, you should try reading your own book. And I do remind them that I wrote the book for me, that everything in there that I talk about is a struggle I've had. And you know what, Julie? Still struggle with things. And so it's a gift from me to other people, but really it was written to me.
Mm-hmm. It's a reminder. You need the reminder. We all need the reminder.
Yeah.
I think that's really powerful. It's, having that time and to think about all of this and to reflect on your life, it opens up a lot, right? It opens up a lot of realizations and growth and insight into how you are the way you are and why you make decisions. And my favorite part, though, I just reflect on everything you said here. It's all going through my mind, was that this voice came out of you unbidden, and every descriptive word that you use to describe that voice is exactly the type of voice that we should all be hearing in our minds. That's the voice that should all be speaking to us. I have not read your book, John, and I'm actually very excited to do. It sounds very interesting. Now, you said that this is a first installment in a multi-part series. So you already have ideas of where you're going with these next books?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's the second book is probably about 95% complete, and that will go into second draft.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And I've always seen it as being part of a trilogy of books, and I think there's enough to say there to fill up a trilogy of books. And then I will let him, whoever he is, I suppose he's me, I will let him slip off and rest. He's been awful busy, and we'll move on to other things. But I've been blessed in writing this, and I think that's, for me, when I know I'm in the flow, when I feel that my efforts are blessed, that there's joy in it, there's satisfaction in it. It's not difficult. I always said that about acting. I get paid to do what I love. How many people could say that?
Isn't that that's such a gift.
In terms of acting, I've never done a day's work in my life.
Is one of the best things that you could possibly be able to say.
Absolutely.
It's the goal that everyone strives for.
Absolutely.
Is there if someone isn't feeling that they are living that kind of life, is there any piece of advice that you would give someone?
There's an awful lot of money is made today in trying to teach people, and a lot of it's snake oil, trying to teach people to follow their bliss. There's an awful lot of books and podcasts and this and that and gurus and blah, blah, blah. And by the way, I don't claim to be any of those things. Like I say, that book was written for me. I'm letting you read it. And if it helps you, that's great. I'm not setting myself up to be any kind of guru or self-help person or life coach or anything like that. I need to read my own book a lot of the days. But there's an awful lot of a big industry out there, and I know because I've read a lot of them, which is making an awful lot of money leading people along this path of finding this place of pure joy. And it doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. Life isn't like that. Life is ironically, if you've ever watched a sinus rhythm heartbeat. I'm looking at one right now as I speak. For anyone listening, we're using something called Zencaster to record this. And when I speak, it records the rhythm of my voice speaking. I can see it in front of me. And life's a bit like that. It's a bit like a heartbeat. It's got its ups and then it's got its lows and then it's got its fallow times and then ups and lows and fallow times. And that's part of living the human life. There is
isn't
no
it?
such thing as living in bliss in the sense that it's meant, or what people understand it to mean, which is constant joy. Jolie, if we all lived in constant joy, we'd all pass away from the stress of it. You know, who, who could cope with that amount of adrenaline flooding through the system from constant joy every day? We'd all be dead 5 minutes later. That's not the way human beings are designed. And so to people that are not in that place in their life, I have found C.S. Lewis talks about, I think it's joy unbidden. And the idea that joy is something which comes upon you, whatever you're doing, providing you're open to it. I have enjoyed every professional acting job I've ever done, but I've not always been happy in them. It's not the same thing. And I have absolutely hated some of the stuff I've had to do in between acting jobs, but I've been happy in the moment.
Oh, I love this.
And so for me, we talk about in AA, we talk about it being an inside job. It is an inside job. In my experience, the joy of life, the success of life is something that comes from the inside out, not from the outside in. And that's a bit hackneyed. People talk about that a lot, but that is my experience. In the days where I am centered and grateful, so important to be grateful, centered and grateful and willing and open and humble. Those tend to be the days that I experience something worthy of my joy. And that isn't always a phone call from my agent, by the way. That isn't always a fabulous media interview or watching myself on the big screen. Sometimes it's a phone call from a friend. Sometimes it's, when we're allowed to, it's a friend saying, listen, I'm heading off to the hardware store. We call it B&Q in this country. You call it the hardware store probably over there. I'm heading off to the hardware store. There's a seat in my car. Do you want to join me? Because you'd said that you wanted to get some tins of paint. Yes, absolutely. And by the way, let's stop off and have a bit of a takeaway on the way back. It's that. Yeah. And so if you are in a place in your life where you're thinking, I want to be in that place of happiness and joy, it does exist. And it isn't, I have discovered, it is not directly dependent upon the situation that I am in.
No, you're so right. You just filled my heart all up. It's the perfect answer. And it's so true. It is an inside job. And just like you said, there were moments where you were doing things that you may have hated in between, but you were joyful in that moment, or you brought joy into the moment.
And let me also say, Jolie, having said all of this to you right now, I may very well come off this phone, go on the phone to a friend and complain about my life situation. And that's also part of being human. I'm also a hypocrite. Okay? That's why I needed to write a book to myself.
Yes. Okay? It's so perfect.
You know?
We're only human.
We're only human. And it's okay. And that's what I mean about that sinus rhythm. Yeah. You know, life is meant to be up, down, middle, and everywhere in between. Again, going back to 12-step, and by the way, I wish 12-step programs could be available for everyone. I really do, because everybody could benefit from one to a certain extent. And one of the things that we talk about in 12-step programs is a bridge to normal living.
Tell me about that.
So Bridge to Normal Living is exactly what it says it is. And so a lot of people will come in and they'll say, I want to be the best at AA and I want to be the best sort of sober person and I want to do so much work and I'm going to give up my job and I'm just going to do full-time AA work and I don't know how I'll live, but I'll just make it work. And I go, hold on a minute. That's not a bridge to normal living. That's not normal living. Normal living is a balance. And it's a balance of pleasant things. And it's a balance of unpleasant things. And unfortunately, that's part of life. People die. People will betray you. People will hurt you. People will do things that will make you angry and upset. Governments will do that. Whole continents of people will do that. And it's also the kindness of a stranger in the street. It's also that letter from a friend that fills your heart up. And it's everything else in between. And that's a normal day. It's normal life. If we, like I say, if we were to live life in constant joy, our bodies are not designed for it, we'd be dead within half an hour.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, that was amazing. And you know what? I think everyone probably feels a little bit more understood. Honestly. It's so very true.
Allow
Hmm.
yourself to be. Somebody said
It's
the other day,
very,
I've got a dog, and I know we're heading into wrap up time, but I adopted a dog about 3 or 4 months ago, a border collie. If anyone's ever had a border collie, they'll know that they are a special type of dog,
uh-huh.
and right now my border collie's having what's called what is it they call it, blowing their coat, they call it, and it means that they lose almost their entire coat over an 8 week
Oh,
period.
wow.
Yeah, and it's all over my house. When I first got this dog, I was has to stay in the kitchen, and he only comes into the living room at a certain time when he's been cleaned and this, that, and the other. And somebody said to me, "Can you not just let him be a dog?" Yeah, I'm trying to make this dog like a child, and I feel the same way about us, Jolie. Sometimes I think to myself, "Can you not just let yourself be a human?"
Mm. Oh, you know what? That makes me think of that. I think it's a Rumi quote. He talks about how you walk into a forest and you see the trees and how you admire the trees exactly how they are with their knots or
Mm,
their bends, and
mm,
they're beautiful. Why can't we do that with looking at humans? Why do we look at a human and want to change them? Why can't we
mm.
look at them and see them as the tree, as
Yeah,
beautiful as they are with all their
yeah, absolutely.
imperfections? Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So when you say, I'm just out of curiosity because I'm going to be honest, I don't know what's special about a border collie. Is it because they shed, or is there something else?
Oh no, they're very intelligent dogs. I can't remember the name of the intelligence scale, but there is a scale of intelligence for dogs, and border collies sit at the top of it. So
Ooh.
they're like children, and they're incredibly bright. There's no pulling the wool over the eyes of a border collie, and but they're also really loyal. They're very affectionate. Mine is called Brody, and he's. I think he's sleeping as we speak. He's
Yeah.
about to go out for his final walk of the evening after I finish up. I'll
All right.
such a glamorous life I lead, Julian. When I'm not doing podcast interviews, I'm walking my dog in the mud.
That sounds
And
like a wonderful.
he's brought an extraordinary dimension into my life that didn't exist. And he
Right.
came out of the blue. He needed a home, and I got a phone call one day saying this dog is a failed sheepdog, and he was going to just live on the farm, but unfortunately, the farmer, I believe, fell into financial difficulty and had to sell his farm. And you can sell a working sheepdog, but you can't sell one that doesn't work. And so he needed a home, and he came to me, and we were like best buddies now.
Isn't it the best? Oh, I
Yeah,
love it. I love my dog too. It's just, they're a gift to life in every way.
absolutely, absolutely.
So you during this pandemic, you got a new best friend and you launched a book, which is going to turn into a series. That's some exciting stuff to come out of your big pause.
It is. All I need is
So
an acting job now, Julie. Like I say, any casting director listening, think no, no. It's been what I wanted it to be, which is I didn't want it to be a waste.
you didn't. And isn't that is wonderful. I completely agree. That's how I felt too. It was a very unique time
Mm,
in not only our lives, but in the past century, really, to have this happen in the world.
mm,
It's again, there's a lot of horrible things, but
mm,
to take the moment and at least try to find something for yourself to bring out of it, I think
mm,
is an
absolutely.
important thing. So I think it's wonderful that you birthed this book and it's going to turn into other things, and I can't wait to check it out. We will have a link for people to find your books on there in the show notes as well.
You are
So
very kind. Thank
now,
you.
before we go, anything else that we didn't cover or you want to add before we sign off?
I think I'll take your lead. Is there anything? Is there anything that you want to cover before we do? Is there anything you'd like to talk about?
I have so enjoyed this talk. I have loved everything that you said. It just all of the little stories have turned into something very insightful. So
Yeah.
I am really grateful for your time. I'm curious, author, actor, do you have any other talents that you're pursuing in your life out of curiosity?
I used to be a photographer, and
Oh,
that's
yeah.
yeah. I think that's something.
Interesting.
I think that's something that I'll take up again at some point. Any other talents, though? I don't know.
Left that off, obviously, opera singer.
Yeah, I never really performed as an opera singer. I ended up going into the much different world of musical theatre. But yes, singing, I've recorded, I've done all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I mean, that's when I say I sometimes feel like I've not had a career. I've had a series of lovely jobs because it's been so diverse and it's been so unusual and eclectic, and I like it that way.
I agree.
I'm a bit. I guess I'm a bit eccentric. And so any career that I've had should probably follow that pattern as well, because that's what suits me, you know.
I call it, being a Renaissance man. That's my goal personally in life. I want to be a Renaissance woman. I want to have my hands in lots of different things that excite me.
I remember at a party years and years ago, an actor came up to me and he said, "You sing, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "And you act as well, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You know something?" I said, he said, "One day you're going to have to choose between those two." And I said, "Why?"
Yeah.
And he didn't have an answer.
He didn't have an answer. Oh, someone told him that once.
and that's one of my favourite statements or questions or retorts, and I use it an awful lot, and I try not to be aggressive with it, but I'm not sure I always succeed. But I do love that word, why?
Why?
Because it does elicit an awful lot of cognitive dissonance in people. They make these very secure statements, and this is the way it must be, and that's the way it must be. And I go, why? And they go, I don't know. And so it's a great word. And I would advise anyone listening, if there's anything they take away from this that I've said at all tonight, take away the word why. Use it more liberally.
I agree. I love it. And it makes, like you said, it makes people stop and think and question, is this something I really believe, or is this something I was just told and I've been regurgitating it ever since?
Absolutely.
Let's reject those bullshit roles.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, John. This was wonderful. I really appreciate your time.
Good. Listen, I appreciate yours as well. It's been a real honour and privilege for me to come on and chat with you, and so we've really just chewed the fat tonight, haven't we? And it's been. I kind of feel like I feel like we've been sitting in a cafe over a coffee, and that's always the nicest way for these kind of interviews to be. So thank you very much for a lovely experience.
Agreed. Thank you. I loved my talk with John Jack. He was inspiring on so many levels. I love that during his great pause, he looked for a way to help other people. And in doing so, he found a way to help himself, as seems to be a universal rule with life. Being creative is a gift to the soul. It's a soothing process that brings satisfaction and focus. Hitting that creative zone allows a mental escape for a short time, and I'm sure has been an effective coping mechanism for many people out there. I am truly looking forward to this coming renaissance that I believe will be happening. If you're looking for ways to cope, find yourself a creative focus. What appeals to you? There's so many ways to be creative. There's writing, singing, musical instruments, woodworking, metalwork, craft work, art, digital work, community events. I mean, there's so many ways to create and birth new things into this world. What do you have inside of you waiting to be brought forth? I want us all to find those creative outlets that will bring joy to the soul in times of need. I appreciate how open and honest John was. And his stories, they can bring comfort to so many. Sharing about going through losing his mom. We have been through a hellish year and have lost countless moms, dads, grandparents, and loved ones. There is so much grief. For anyone out there grieving, I am so sorry. I hope you have found your people to give you support and surround you with love. I know that even if you have that love, it doesn't make it easy. I also know that sometimes you can have that love and still not know how exactly to be around it. We all grieve differently, and that's okay. What's important is that we go through it, work through it, avoiding the feeling or shutting them down through whatever drugs, drinking, overactivity. It only prolongs the problem and makes it worse. The only way out is through. Do your best to let other people help you through. Even if you're someone who has a hard time asking for help, this is the time to do it. Start practicing and ask for that help. Grief is so insidious, And grief needs to be balanced with gratitude. As much as you can give, stop and focus in on what you can feel grateful for. Even if it's the smallest of things, bringing that grateful feeling into that moment and letting it infuse you, it gives your grief those needed zaps of gratitude. And as John mentioned, find work that nourishes your soul. Take a class or find a creative outlet to give your soul needed breaks. I know there's a lot of fear after losing a loved one. New fears start to pop up that you didn't have before. If this is happening for you, recognize it as a natural response and proactively try to work with your fear. Notice it when it arrives. Do not judge it. Know it's normal. And then replace that picture with a positive one. Continuously work on visualizing best outcome scenarios. What if everything went exactly right? Picture that. This is like medicine for your grieving brain. While visualizing, breathe deeply, and when you exhale, breathe out the fear. Breathe out the fear. Above all, please be kind to yourself. I know that the questions that come after the death of a loved one can feel endless. I know that the recriminations that come can be soul-crushing. None of them are helpful. You must learn how to let go. You must learn how to forgive both yourself and others. The past cannot be changed. Only the future can be altered. Use this life feedback as motivation to move forward and learn more about the people you are with now. Be mindful in your relationships and write your own story while you still have the time. John also talked about having the right thinking, paying attention to his thought process, proactively analyzing and amending his thoughts. This is so vital. We should absolutely question our thought process. Our brains naturally go negative. It's a biological response to our caveman days where it behooved us to believe everything was going to kill us. It served us to think this way. It made sense for our brains to go negative, but that is no longer the case. Negative thinking is no longer saving our lives. It is hurting us. Positive thinking can absolutely transform your life. It is a practice, and one that needs consistent daily practice. When your mind goes negative, replace it with the opposite, the most positive, understanding voice you can bring forth, like the one that came to John when he was writing his book, warm, reassuring, and kind. This is the voice to be listening to. Take a note from John and look back at your life kindly. Look at your younger self. What advice would you give yourself? What kind of kindness did you need to hear at that time? You can train your brain to start responding positively, but it takes concentrated awareness. Work on it every day and watch your world fill in with color in so many more ways. I loved John's key to continued success. Effort. Effort. True story. Effort is king. Without effort, there is nothing. As John mentioned, trace all your strokes of luck. They can be traced back to something you've done. Whether it's been days, months, or years ago, your effort pays off in ways you can't even imagine. But without effort, there is stalling, there is stagnation. You have to put in the energy to keep the movement in life. John also shared the key to starting his day successfully, making his bed. This is a common life hack that successful people adopt in their lives. Do something immediately in the morning that makes you feel as if you accomplished something successfully. Something small that can be done every day, like making your bed, to give you that accomplished feeling. It starts your mindset off on the right track. It tricks your brain into that right direction. A mind in success mode will stay in success mode as you move through your day. I am also grateful that John talked about his AA experience, how AA saved his life. I know countless others it has saved. It is a program that works. And I know so many people out there are struggling. If anyone listening is struggling right now, I really hope that you'll reach out for help. It is so easy to fall into addiction and so much harder to get yourself out. Please be kind to yourself. Allow yourself the help and reach out. I appreciated the anecdote John shared about someone telling him he would have to choose between acting and singing. And he simply responded with, why? I love that he had the insight and intelligence to ask, why? Rather than blindly accepting a rule handed down by above, why is the question to be asking? It is curious and inquisitive, and it opens the door to understanding. Why helps you decipher, is this something I really believe? Or is it something I was told and have since accepted? Remember to ask, why? There was so much goodness in this talk, but I'm going to leave you with this final thought from John Jack. The joy that comes upon you, regardless of what you are doing, you are open to it at any time. That joy is an inside job. When you are centered, grateful, willing, open, and humble, those are the days full of experiences worthy of joy. This is not dependent on the situation you are in. This is dependent on the mindset you embody. You can be joyful in any moment. And this is my wish for us all, to do the inside work and to find that centered place where we can find the joy in whatever we do. Until next time. Thank you for spending time with us on Fresh Blood. If you love this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, or giving us a review. I'm looking forward to connecting with you again on the next episode.